My name is Audrey. A year ago, life sucker punched us. Our little boy, our 9-year-old Mikey, lost his battle with leukemia. My husband Mark, a factory engineer, and I, an economist, were left grappling with a loss too immense to comprehend. Mikey wasn't just our son. He was our sunshine, our hope, our joy. He was a spitfire full of life and laughter. Even when the illness tried to dim his light, he'd look at us with his big, brave eyes and say, "I'm going to beat this, Mom. You watch." And we believed him because he was our little warrior. I remember the day he was diagnosed. We were in the doctor's office, holding on to each other and to hope. The doctor, with a grave face, told us, "I'm sorry, it's leukemia." The room went quiet. It felt like the air had been sucked out of it. Mark was the first to break the silence. "We'll fight it," he said, his voice firm. "We'll do whatever it takes." And fight we did. The days turned into a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and countless prayers. Mikey, bless his heart, fought like a champ. He'd throw up and cry from the pain, but then wipe his tears and say, "Is that all you got, cancer?" But the disease was relentless. It took away his energy, his laughter, his hair, but not his spirit. He'd lay in his hospital bed, frail and tired, but still managed to give us a thumbs up. "I'm good, Dad. I'm good," he'd say, trying to reassure us. The day we lost him, Mark and I were at home, waiting for a call from the hospital. The phone rang, and Mark picked it up. His face went white. He didn't have to say anything. Knew our little warrior was gone. Mark finally found his voice. He's gone, Audrey," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I remember collapsing onto the floor, Mark holding me as we cried. For months, our house felt like a tomb, silent and cold. I spent days in bed, lost in my grief. Mark tried to keep it together for both of us. He'd go to work, come back, and hold me as I cried. One day, I found him in Mikey's room, holding his favorite action figure. He was crying, his body shaking with sobs. I sat next to him, and we mourned together. We mourned for our boy, for the life he could have had, for the dreams that would never come true. After we lost our Mikey, I was stuck in a dark place. It felt like I was trapped in a never-ending tunnel with no light at the end. But Mark, my husband, refused to let me sink. He was hurting too, but he put on a brave face for us. Every morning, he'd gently shake me awake. "Audrey, time to rise and shine," he'd say. I'd just grunt, pulling the duvet over my head. I wanted to hide, to escape the harsh reality that our boy was no longer with us. But Mark, he was relentless. He'd sit on the edge of the bed, his hand finding mine under the covers. "We got to keep moving, Audrey, for Mikey," he'd say. His voice was always steady, but I could hear the underlying pain. So I started getting up. It felt like moving mountains. The world outside seemed too harsh, too real. Every little thing reminded me of Mikey, but I pushed through the pain. I started doing simple things, cooking breakfast, washing clothes. They were just everyday chores, but they kept me anchored, stopping me from losing myself in grief. Mark and I started taking walks in the evening. We'd walk hand in hand, mostly in silence. Sometimes we'd talk about Mikey. Remember the time Mikey tried to make pancakes and nearly burnt the house down? Mark would chuckle, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. We'd laugh together, and for a fleeting moment, the crushing weight of grief would lift. One day, out of the blue, Mark brought home a puppy, a golden retriever, the kind Mikey always begged us for. "Thought this little guy might help," he said, his eyes pleading for my approval. I was startled. I didn't know if I was ready for another living being in our life, another soul to love and potentially lose. But I looked into the puppy's innocent eyes, and my heart melted. We named him Buddy. He was a bundle of energy, always scampering around, gnawing at our shoes. He brought a sense of life back into our home. His playful barks and whimpers filled the deafening silence that had settled since Mikey's departure. In a strange way, Buddy helped us heal. He gave us something to focus on, a distraction from our pain. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy. There were days when the grief was so overwhelming, I felt like I was drowning. But then I'd look at Mark and Buddy, and I'd find a shred of strength to keep going. I found courage in their love and resilience. Living without Mikey was something I couldn't have ever imagined, but we were doing it, one agonizing day at a time. We were finding strength in each other and in the memories of our beautiful boy. We were learning to live with our loss, finding small moments of happiness amidst the sorrow. It was a slow, painful process, but we were making progress. Finding strength after losing a part of your soul is not easy. It's a battle, an uphill walk, but it's a battle worth fighting because, when all is said and done, life goes on and we need to move with it. No matter how painful it is for us, we do it for our Mikey, because that's what he would have wanted. He was our little warrior, and we needed to honor his memory by living, by finding strength in our loss. "Hey, Audrey," Mark began, breaking the silence. We were sitting on the porch, just watching the sun go down, the cool evening breeze rustling the leaves. Buddy was off somewhere, probably digging another hole in the yard. "I've been thinking," he said. I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah?" I asked, waiting for him to continue. Mark was always a man of few words, so when he said he'd been thinking, it usually meant something serious. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've been thinking about us having another kid," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I just stared at him, unable to process his words. Another kid. Was he out of his mind? We'd lost our Mikey, and he was talking about having another child. "Are you crazy, Mark?" I finally blurted out, my heart pounding in my chest. "We can't just replace Mikey." Mark shook his head quickly. "No, Audrey, I don't mean replace him. God, I could never do that. I miss it, Audrey. I miss being a dad. I miss our family." I could see the pain in his eyes, the longing. I understood what he was saying. I missed being a mom too. I missed the laughter, the chaos, the love, but the thought of having another child scared me. It felt like a betrayal to Mikey. "I don't know, Mark," I said, my voice shaky. "It feels like we'd be betraying Mikey." Mark reached out, taking my hands in his. "Audrey, we could never betray Mikey. He'll always be our son, our firstborn. But I believe we have more love to give, and I think Mikey would want us to be happy." His words hit me hard. I knew he was right. Mikey wouldn't want us to live in sorrow forever. He would want us to move on, to find happiness again. But the thought of loving another child was terrifying. "I'm scared, Mark," I admitted, tears welling up in my eyes. "I'm scared of loving another child, scared of losing another one." Mark squeezed my hands, his eyes filled with understanding. "I'm scared too, Audrey, but I think we can do this, for us, for Mikey." We sat there holding hands as the sun set, the world seeming to hold its breath, waiting for my response. After what felt like an eternity, I finally found my voice. "Okay, Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Let's do it. Let's have another child." Mark looked at me, his eyes filled with relief and joy. "Really, Audrey?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. I nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yeah, Mark, let's give it a shot." And that was it. We decided to try for another child. It was a scary decision, but it felt right. We had love to give, and we wanted to be parents again. Most importantly, we wanted to honor Mikey. We wanted to live again, to find happiness for us and for Mikey. The smell of Mary's famous roast chicken and baked potatoes wafted through the house. Bill, Mark's dad, was at the head of the table, carving the chicken with precision. Mark's sister Linda, her husband Bob, and their son John were also there. Linda was always a bit of a loose cannon, with a knack for saying the most outrageous things without batting an eye. Tonight she was in full form, leaning back in her chair and holding court, her voice loud and clear, her laughter ringing out. She had a glass of red wine in her hand, waving it around as she spoke, drops occasionally splashing onto the tablecloth. We were halfway through the meal, just making small talk, when Linda turned to Mark and me. "So, Audrey, Mark," she began, a smirk on her face, "I've been thinking about Mikey's college fund." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Mikey's college fund was something Mark's grandma had set up for him when he was born. It was supposed to be for his future, for his education, but Mikey was gone. Linda, with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, continued, "Well, since Mikey isn't going to use it, I thought maybe John could have it." I felt like the world had stopped spinning. I just stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. She wanted us to give Mikey's college fund to John. I glanced at Mark, but he seemed just as shell-shocked as I was. Linda, oblivious to our shock, went on, "I mean, John's starting college next year, and it's not like Mikey's going to need it, right?" The room fell silent. I could see Mary and Bill exchanging worried glances while Bob just stared at his plate. My hands were shaking. I was furious and hurt. How could Linda be so heartless, so selfish? I felt a lump in my throat and tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, but I swallowed hard, forcing them back. I wasn't going to give Linda the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "Linda," I said, my voice shaking, "that money was for Mikey. It's not yours to give away." Linda just shrugged, a smug smile on her face. "Well, it's not like Mikey's going to use it, is he?" she retorted. I was speechless. I just stared at her, my mind a whirl of emotions. I wanted to yell at her to tell her how wrong she was, but I was too hurt. "Linda, that was low, even for you." I finally managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. "That was cruel and inappropriate." Linda just shrugged again, feigning innocence. "What? I'm just being practical," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I barely remember what was said or what was eaten. All I could think about was Linda's audacity. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her take Mikey's college fund. It was his and would always be his, no matter what Linda said. After that bombshell dinner, Mark and I found ourselves in the sanctuary of our home, both still reeling from Linda's audacious proposition. The night was still, the only sound being the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Mark was slumped on the couch, his face buried in his hands. I was pacing the room, my mind racing. "Can you believe her, Mark?" I exploded, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "The nerve of that woman." Mark didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, shoulders hunched. Finally, he looked up at me, his face pale. "I know, Audrey," he said, his voice heavy. I can't believe it either. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of Linda's words hanging in the air. Finally, I spoke up. "We can't let her have Mikey's money, Mark," I said firmly. "It's not hers to take." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Audrey," he said, "and we won't. That money was for Mikey. It's his." "She doesn't see it that way," I retorted, my voice rising. "She just sees it as free money." Mark reached out, taking my hand in his. "Audrey, we can't let her get to us," he said, his voice steady. "We know what's right, and we'll fight for it." I nodded, biting my lip. "You're right, Mark," I said, my voice shaky. "We can't let her win." Mark squeezed my hand, giving me a small smile. "And besides," he added softly, "that money will be useful when we have our own baby." His words gave me hope, even though we had been trying for a baby for a while with no luck. Just then, my phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. I picked it up, my heart pounding. It was Bob, Linda's husband. "Audrey, I'm sorry," he said, his voice apologetic. "I didn't know Linda was going to say that. I don't agree with her." His words were a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. I thanked him, my voice shaky, and hung up. The morning after Linda's outrageous proposition, I was still fuming. The audacity of that woman. I'd always known she was selfish, but this was a new low. I decided to do some digging. If Linda was willing to stoop so low as to ask for Mikey's money, who knew what else she was capable of? I fired up my laptop and logged into Facebook. I cringed as I typed Linda's name into the search bar. I hadn't visited her profile in years, and for good reason. The woman was insufferable, but this was important. I needed to know what she was up to. As I scrolled through her profile, my blood began to boil. There she was, flaunting her new designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and lavish vacations. Our mutual friends were gushing over her extravagant lifestyle in the comments. I decided to reach out to one of them, a woman named Susan who I'd always liked. She was down to earth and honest, and I trusted her. I sent her a message asking about Linda's recent spending spree. "Oh, Audrey," she replied, her words appearing on my screen. "You have no idea. Linda's been living it up. She's been spending money like there's no tomorrow." I felt a knot in my stomach. "But what about John's college fund?" I asked. "Isn't she worried about that?" Susan's reply was immediate. "Audrey, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Linda's already spent all that money on herself." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Linda had spent John's college fund on herself. I couldn't believe it. But then again, maybe I could. This was Linda we were talking about, after all. I thanked Susan for her honesty and logged off. I felt sick to my stomach. Linda had spent all of John's money, and now she wanted Mikey's. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. I sat there staring at my screen, my mind racing. I was furious, but more than that, I was determined. Linda had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I picked up my phone and dialed Mark's number. "Mark," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk. It's about Linda." Mark was silent for a moment, then spoke, his voice grim. "What has she done now, Audrey?" I took a deep breath. "She spent all of John's college fund, Mark," I said, "on herself." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "I can't believe it," Mark said, his voice shaky. "That's selfish. I can't believe she'd do something like that." "I know, Mark," I replied, my voice calm. "But we can't let her get away with it. We need to stop her from Mikey." There was a long pause. Then Mark spoke, his voice resolute. "You're right, Audrey. We need to stop her." As I hung up the phone, I felt a surge of determination. Linda had shown her true colors, and they were ugly. But we weren't going to let her win. Not this time. Not ever. I called up Mark's folks and told them to drop everything and meet me at their house. The atmosphere was as thick as pea soup when I walked into their living room. I took a deep breath and spilled the beans. "Linda's blown all of John's college cash," I said, my voice shaky. "On herself." Mark's dad, a big burly guy who usually had a smile on his face, looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "That rotten," he snarled, his voice echoing through the room. Mark's mom, a sweet old lady who always had a kind word for everyone, looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Our own daughter," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How could she?" Mark, who'd been as quiet as a mouse, finally piped up. "We aren't going to let her get away with this," he said, his voice as hard as nails. "We're going to fight her on this." The very next day, I was at home when I heard a loud bang on the door. It was Linda, her face red as a beetroot. "You ratted me out," she hissed, her eyes blazing like a wildfire. "You told them about the money." "I did," I said, standing my ground. "That money wasn't yours, Linda. It was for John's schooling, not for you to blow on fancy clothes and shoes." Linda's face turned an ugly shade of purple. "You're going to pay for this," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll wish you never crossed me." With that, she stormed off, leaving me shaking in my boots. I knew then that Linda meant business, But I also knew that I couldn't back down. Not now. A couple of days later, I went to visit Mikey's grave. As I got closer, I noticed something was off. The flowers I'd left were trampled, and the small angel statue I'd placed by the headstone was smashed to bits. My heart sank. I knew who'd done this. I immediately called the cops. They showed up in no time and started poking around. After a while, they told me they'd found some footage from the security cameras at the cemetery. It was Linda. She was the one who trashed Mikey's grave. I called Mark, my voice trembling with rage. "Mark," I said, "Linda desecrated Mikey's grave." There was a pause on the other end, then Mark spoke, his voice colder than a winter's night. "That witch," he said. "I can't believe she'd stoop so low." "We got to do something, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "We can't let her keep doing this to us." As I put down the phone, I felt a surge of determination. Linda had shown just how far she was willing to go, but we weren't about to let her get away with it. We were going to fight her every step of the way. For Mikey, for John, for all of us. After Linda's nasty stunt, we gave her the cold shoulder. No more Sunday dinners, no more family gatherings. She was out, plain and simple. Even her own husband, Bob, couldn't stand the sight of her. He served her the divorce papers quicker than you can say Jack Robinson. It was a bitter pill for him to swallow, realizing his own wife had turned out to be such a snake in the grass. The fallout from Linda's betrayal was like a bomb going off in our lives, but it also brought Mark and me closer. We were in the same boat, dealing with the same pain. We leaned on each other, helped each other through the tough times. We became more than just in-laws. We became allies and friends. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Slowly but surely we picked up the pieces. We were a team, and nothing could break us. Not Linda, not her betrayal, nothing. One day I went to visit Mikey's grave. It was a sunny day, and the cemetery was peaceful. I sat down next to his headstone, feeling a strange sense of calm. "Hey, Mikey," I said softly. "I miss you, kiddo, but I want you to know we're doing okay. We're sticking together, just like you'd want." I felt a soft breeze on my face, like a gentle caress. I smiled. "I know you're watching over us, Mikey. We'll make you proud." As I walked away from the cemetery, I felt a sense of peace. We had been through hell and back, but we were still standing. We were stronger than ever and ready to face whatever life had in store for us. In the midst of all this chaos, I found out I was expecting. When I told Mark, his face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Audrey," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "this is the best news I've heard in a long time." I smiled at him, my heart swelling with love. "I thought you'd be happy." He pulled me into his arms, his eyes shining. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it, Audrey. This is a miracle, a blessing." He paused, deep in thought. "The money we plan to spend on Mikey's education, we'll use it for our unborn child. We'll give them the best life possible." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. I think Mikey would have wanted that. As we sat there planning for the future, I felt a sense of hope. Despite everything, we were moving forward. We were turning our pain into something positive, and I knew deep down that we were going to be okay. We were going to make it together.